Welcome to Growth Beyond Boundaries, the podcast by the Ad Astra Coach Alliance that explores the transformative power of coaching, leadership, and innovation. I'm your host, Andy Huckaba, and I'm so excited to have you join us. Here at the Ad Astra Coach Alliance, we believe growth isn't just a goal, it's a journey. Whether you're a leader striving to inspire your team, a professional seeking your next breakthrough, or an organization ready to transform your culture, this podcast is for you. Each segment, we bring you stories, strategies, and insights from our team of seasoned coaches and leaders across industry. Together, we'll discover innovative approaches to fostering a culture built on success, accountability, and collaboration, rooted in both challenging and compassionate coaching practices. So if you're ready to go beyond boundaries and discover what's possible, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Well, welcome to 2026. Today, we will talk about leading with intention or intentional leadership. And the beginning of the new year, I think, is what caused us to pick this topic, because that oftentimes represents a end and a beginning that causes us to reflect and think about where we want to go, what we want to do. People make New Year's resolutions, which most people never keep.
Yeah.
Those feel like goals. But what are our expectations, and how do we become more intentional about how we do things? Leading with clarity, creating space for reflection, what grounds us in the work that we do. And so some questions that I hope we address today. What is it, intentional leadership? Why is it important? How will it help you become more effective or be more effective in the new year? And what are some strategies and tools to help you get there? I'm joined today by Teresa Schwab. Teresa, of course, is a longtime participant in this podcast. She's also a partner with the Ad Astra Coach Alliance and the president of Arnavon Strategies. Teresa, welcome.
Hi, Andy. It's great to be with you today.
It's always great to have you. So, as we look at this idea of intentional leadership, what are some of your just emerging thoughts in terms of how we talk about this issue?
Yeah. We were having a good conversation today before we started to record. And one of the things that really resonated with me was this metaphor of a car. And, sometimes your car, when you're driving it over a long period of time, if you don't maintain it and you don't go get alignments and you don't take care of it, sometimes you might find yourself 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years down the road with a hard right hole. And then you have really a bigger challenge that you need to deal with. And so in some ways, that's what this feels like, is that a moment in time, the end of the year, the beginning of the year, is a really nice moment to be able to pause and get a little bit of a realignment. So you're back in tune with who you want to be, what you want to accomplish, what the people that you're leading need from you. And it allows you to be much more intentional about the way that you go about the work that you're doing. And I think it grounds you back in your values and your purpose and the things that are truly meaningful.
I see, as we talk about this idea and why this is even important to us, that being intentional, being focused, making the work meaningful is not only important to the people we lead, but it's also important to us and
Absolutely.
our sense of accomplishment, our sense of direction, that we're not drifting out into a lot of different places that we shouldn't go, but we're staying more focused and on the road and grounded. What does that sound like to you?
Yeah. I was just thinking about, I was listening to Jonathan Fields the other day, and he has these three buckets that he uses for planning purposes, which are connection, contribution, and vitality. And I really like those buckets because it helps you align your goals or your intentions or your priorities for the
Mm.
year in a way that make you feel balanced. But one of the things he talks about in those buckets is that if you're not intentional, if you don't tend to each one of the buckets, one law of the buckets is that they will leak. So that leakage then drains the energy off and then puts those things off balance. So that's kind of what I was thinking about when you were talking about that. That leakage will occur if we're not intentional about the way that we do the planning, because the balance piece is so critical to us being able to show up in a way that we're at our most effective.
It sounds like this idea of doing less better instead of
Wouldn't
doing
that be awesome?
everything just sort of okay, but doing less better.
I love that. The focus is so critical because I don't think most of us understand how buckets are leaking until they've leaked so far that we're depleted or burnt out. And
Yeah.
that's the other piece of this that I think is so helpful, as the intentionality is to make sure those buckets are filled up, that your energy
Mm.
is sitting across those kinds of buckets, that we've got balance in our life and that we can be at our best and not depleted, and that we don't end up sick or stressed out or not leading effectively because we're being triggered all of the time. It's just, I love that. I like that sort of idea of, it's really about focus.
Yeah. Do we do this to ourselves in terms of the leakage, the drifting, does or does the circumstance that we're in do it to us? What does that look like?
Well, don't you think it's a little bit of both?
Yeah, probably.
Like it's probably a little bit of both. I think it depends on our personality. Some of us drive harder than others. And if we're not paying attention to it, some of us experience deeper pressures. Maybe we're a one income household, or maybe we're trying to establish a reputation,
Yeah.
or maybe our board of directors or our board of trustees are putting out really big goals that our jobs depend on. So I think culturally, that's how we run, is about performance, and about our measure of success is about how we perform and what kinds of things we can accomplish. That's not really about who we are necessarily. And that's the cultural water we swim in. And then some of us have personalities that sort of fit beautifully into that model and can be exploited by people outside of us because they know we'll run hard. Which I think is another reason for this intentionality. If we can come back and pause and go, wait a minute, like, should I be running this hard? Is this helpful to me? Is it helpful to my team? Is it sustainable? Can I do this for a
Yeah.
long period of time? And will I be effective?
Well, so let's talk about this pause because I think, this time of year, and certainly the end of last year, this time of year has a tendency to give people a little space
Mm-hmm.
sometimes. Uh,
Yep.
that time where we perhaps can be more reflective and thoughtful. What is inside of that pause that's healthy, that's moving us forward to intentionality?
Yeah. I think, first of all, back to that idea of the cultural water and the pressure. I think there is a lot of pressure on people to pause and create some great plan for the year. So if you're feeling pressure to set some kind of resolution or do some kind of thing or set out some kind of goal, like, give yourself a break. It doesn't have to be the end of the year or the beginning of the year. It could be your birthday. It could be the changing of a season. Anything that just indicates an ending of something and a beginning of something is just a good moment to pause. So I think that's why the beginning of the year is as a nice sort of natural time. But I also think a lot of people feel a lot of pressure around it. So if you're one of those people who feel pressured, don't feel pressured, do it some other time. You're not behind the eight ball. But for me, it is a natural period of time because clients slow down, the work kind of slows down a little bit. And so I feel like I have some more spaciousness in my schedule. And
Right.
I plan out personally a year in advance and intend to take 3 weeks off over the holidays. Sometimes I even take 4 weeks off over the
Mm.
holidays, but I have to plan for that for the entire year. And then that gives me the way to slow down over Christmas leading up to the holidays where I can do all the shopping and do the present wrapping and the food prepping and all that stuff and not feel like I'm going to have to just dive back into work. So I give myself that spaciousness. And then once all the holidays are over, and then I've got another week or two, that spaciousness doesn't rev up my nervous system. I'm moving much more slowly, and it gives me the pause to be able to be intentional, and that works for me. I'm curious, what works for you, Andy, when you think about the pause?
Yeah. Well, first of all, one of the dangers of the pause is that I just turn my brain off.
Uh-huh.
It's one of the dangers that I don't really think forward. I think I just exist in the moment.
Hmm.
Um,
And to
and,
be
and
honest
and
with
I'd
you, I
say
think
that's a
that's okay, though. Don't you think
yeah,
that's
maybe.
okay?
Well, it's probably what I need, and I tend to be pretty good at that, just existing in the moment. And yet, the reflection part of this, and I do spend some time in reflection. What did I like about what I worked on last year, and what I don't like about? What do I want to repeat? What do I not want to repeat? What is unfinished that really matters to me? These types of thoughts, although, I don't just sit down at a desk and just scribble these things out. This is more in the flow of the day. I think through these things and I contemplate these things and in more in an instructive way because I want to make sure that my day, my week, my year is better than it was last year.
Hmm.
And and that says nothing about whether last year was good or bad in the big picture. It says more about where I want to head, something that's forward looking. And so I spend time in the pause. And I want to define the pause for you in a minute here, but I spend time in the pause, number one, being reflective, thinking about what I want to do less of, what I want to do more of. And that tends to give me some energy, by the way. And I think that's important to have. You want to have energy around this. When I think about the pause, my pause is not necessarily an event from December 24th to January 3rd. I'm going to use this time to do this. It's not an event like that. It's more of an ongoing way of being sometimes for me. Every week I sit down and lay out some things that really matter to me moving forward that week. Some of them are tasks, some of them are ideas, some of them are hopes. But but I spend time so perhaps every week is a beginning for me, which is kind of
Uh-huh.
interesting. Uh,
That is kind of interesting.
Perhaps every day is a new beginning for me. I don't know, because I want today to be better than yesterday, and I want the next day to be better. I want to continue to improve and get better, and so I spend time in that. I try to get rid of the things that don't give me energy, don't
Mm.
spark joy, right? It's that Maria Kondo thing.
Yeah. Yep.
I try to get rid of that stuff because, you know, we have to be realistic. We don't have infinite time in front of us to make a difference, to make our mark, to make the world a better place. We don't have infinite time to do that. And so the question is then what's important if you look at it through that lens? That if today is my last day, and
Mm.
I don't want to get dark here on that,
Yep.
but if today is my last day, what do I want today to look like? If this week is my last week, if this year is my last year, what do I want to project forward with? And so that's kind of my mindset as I get into this. And I do reflect on what I've done in the past and pretty much say, yeah, I'm not going to do that anymore. And I've seen you do this too, Teresa, where you've said, okay, I'm done doing that now.
Yep.
I'm going to do this. In a way, this is what we're talking about being intentional, that we don't just let life happen to us. We form it, we create the path. And
Absolutely.
that helps us get to a place where we can be more effective, we can be more impactful.
Absolutely. And back to the idea of intentionality, if we don't pause, if we don't do some kind of exercise, some variation of what you just talked about, if we don't do that, we just get swept out with the tide, and then we're just flailing against the tide. It, if we want to make an impact, if we want to be effective, if we want to be good at what we do and make a difference in the world, we have to realign ourselves
Right.
and readjust to that guiding star. We can call it a guiding star, a north star, a lighthouse, whatever thing that it is, but we've got to have something that helps us recalibrate when the calibration gets off, because that's how life happens. You get caught up in the to-dos and the pressures and the I got to do this and I got to get this done and this has to happen and this has to happen and I have to file my taxes and I've got, you just get washed up. All of that stuff will eat you alive if you let it. And I think that's what sort of brings us back to this idea of intentionality. And that pause allows you to say, I don't want to get eaten up by everything that could eat me up. I want
Yeah.
to make sure that I'm doing with the time that I have on this planet, I want to do the best that I can with it.
This idea of the lighthouse or the North Star intrigues me. And it's something I use often with my clients, talking about where they're headed, what really matters to them. And another metaphor that I think about that ties with that is how many times are you looking down versus looking up at your North Star? When you're looking down at your stuff, you have the ability to drift, to just get wherever, to react to whatever is pressuring you at the time. But when you're looking up at the North Star, your path is clear. How do you
Yeah, I
react to
do.
that?
Well, I use something similar. I talk a lot about, I often use the lighthouse metaphor. I like that because I like the idea of this strong, steady presence that's constant and it's always there. And we know when we look to it, we can see it when things get foggy or murky or the waters get choppy. And that's what life does, is everything gets complicated. But if we can look up. I also use this. Sometimes we'll even talk about the idea of heads down leadership versus heads up leadership.
Yeah.
And when life is eating us alive with a task list and a to-do list and the pressures and the things we've got to get done, and we've got our heads down, our sleeves rolled up, and we're just doing the work, we do lose that. We lose the the North Star. We lose the guidance of the lighthouse because we aren't looking at it. So sometimes I have a very similar sort of way of looking
Yeah.
and talking about that, of heads down and heads up. And I think that really resonates with folks when
Yeah.
I'm coaching them.
Are you willing to share what that space looks like for you?
It's funny. I'm, one of the things that I would say to people, I absolutely am willing to share. And one of the things I would say to people is you need to find a process that works for you. And you need to find one that is resonant with the way that you think and the way that you plan. Some of us like lots of detail. We want to see it out. It
Yeah.
makes us feel calm if we can see it all
Mm.
the way from like, what's the goal, strategy, tactic, timeline, creating smart goals, knowing you have measurables and all of those things. That actually usually makes me feel really calm. And last year I did that. Like I had this really big plan. I narrowed it down and I prioritized it, but it was detailed and it had like timelines, tactics. And this year I scrapped that process. It's not where I'm at. I was in a much more reflective space. And so I took that 3 weeks and I did a lot. Like I think what you did was like, it's sort of moments throughout the day. I think about, how did last year go? Or, I'm noticing what's sort of tugging at my heart, or like, what did I think about that? Do I really want to do that anymore? What am I getting energy? It's just sort of this like process that goes on in my head. It's not like I'm sitting down and I'm reflecting. But then I like to take that sort of stuff that happens up there and I do like to get it down on paper. So I used a couple of different strategies this year. Like I used ChatGPT to help me. I said, listen, like I'm in the end of the year planning. Here's what I'm hoping for next year. Can you help me generate a list of questions that I should be asking myself? It gave me a list of 10 questions and I did like a lot of written reflection on those
Yes.
questions. And I do that in a place that's lovely. We have a sunroom in our house. It's beautiful and light. And so I'll grab a cup of coffee and send the kids off to school and my husband's at work so I can just
Mm.
sit and there's quiet. And that's really helpful for me. And I had a coach one time offer a process to me that's been really helpful over the years, is to sit down at the end of the year and write 100 things that
Yeah.
happened to you over the last year. They are not to be judged. They're just things that happened and you just brainstorm them, like good, bad, ugly, neutral, doesn't matter. Like what can you remember that happened? And I could never get to 100, by the way. I might get to 30 or 50, but I could never get to 100. But I liked the stretch of the 100. But when you get all of that down, it starts to help you think, like, what did I do last year? What were important moments? What do I want to repeat? What do I not want to repeat? What's draining me? What's giving me energy? So for me this year, I scrapped all the detailed plans and I just let all of that work settle. And I started to settle it on words. So for me this year, it was about a word and I couldn't settle on one word. So I came up with actually three. And they're not, one of them is actually more than one word. So they're just, but that's my North Star. And I'll even share them with you. The first one is simplify. And so scrapping that whole detailed plan was part of that process. I want to get rid of everything. I've been having conversations with potential virtual assistants this last couple of weeks, and
Yeah.
they're all pushing me like, what's your strategy? What do you want to do here? And I'm like, I don't want any of that. Like, I get that that is probably the smartest thing that I can do, but I'm in a phase of my life of I'm not overthinking anything. I'm going to put it in place. If it needs to be broken, I'll break it and we'll iterate. I'm in an iteration, innovation space.
Right.
So my second
You
word
know
is
what you're
create.
you know what you're capable of. And so
Yes,
that's not as dangerous.
right. Absolutely. So simplify and create are two of my words. So that's why I'm like, don't ask me about my strategy. I know that that's probably the smart thing to do, but I'm just going to trust, like you said, I'm going to trust myself and I'm going to put some stuff out there. If
Mm.
it doesn't work, fine. I'll take it down. I'll iterate. That's where I'm at, is in a create and a simplify. And the other thing that I've noticed, this is interesting as a coach, is we are not necessarily problem solvers. We are partners in our clients looking at their situations and helping them sort of look at it. But by nature, I am a problem solver. And what I've noticed is that everything has become a problem. It's like, oh, it comes, and then I'm like, oh, I got to fix that. I gotta like do something to solve that problem. I'm like,
Not
that's
only a
stupid.
problem, but your problem.
Yes, exactly. So, which goes along with simplify now that you're saying that. But to me, it's like, stop looking for the problem and start looking for what's going really well. So I am in a process of every day writing down the one thing that was really good about that day. So I am much more in a space of let's find the good. I don't want to be looking for the problem. I don't want to be responsible for solving any problems. I want to iterate, create, move quickly. And so I think those words and phrases all go together. But that's what really settled into my
Yeah.
bones. And now those are really my North Star.
So when you write those down, what really went well, what do you do with those afterwards?
So I have them right next to me. Actually, I have them on this really pretty piece of paper, which to me, aesthetics are really important. So I put them down on this really, I can just like even, well, I can show it to you, but our audience will be able to see this. Like in just a really pretty piece of
Oh, that
paper
is
that
pretty.
has some
Yeah.
flowers on it. And then I keep it next to me all the
Yeah.
time. I write them down frequently. I notice that as I'm thinking about decisions, I write them down. So I'm trying to internalize those. I'm trying to notice when I'm making things overcomplicated, simplify, so it is that process of internalization that really helps them become that North Star or guiding light or whatever metaphor works for you.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, Andy, for you, when you went through this process over the new year where you were sort of thinking about things, did you land on anything that was your guiding star or North Star?
Well, first of all, I would say that the process was energizing for me. It was like fresh, starting new, opening up. And I think that in the midst, we talk about the drift and everything, like in the midst of the work that we can do sometimes, we get kind of closed off, not opened up. And it does feel like a grind over time. It can feel like a grind over time. So what does it look like to really open up and be free to do things? In terms of a North Star or is words that kind of define what I care about, people, relationships, caring, those types of things are really definitive for me. Family, those things are definitive for me in terms of what my North Star is. Creative has always been and will continue to be one of those things that just opens me up, that just sparks me, and different ways to be creative. I mean, for those who are listening, if you don't know, I was a music major in college, studied opera, and those creative genes and juices are always present in me. And sometimes they're more suppressed, and I feel it in my soul, I suppose. And other times they are unleashed, and I just feel open and free and moving and doing the things I want to do. Sometimes I need somebody outside of me to help me recognize that I'm suppressing that. One of those key people is my youngest son, Alex, who has a way of looking at it and empathizing and talking through some of those things with me. And that's helpful. And he said, Dad, you really need to make music again. You really need to play more often. You really need to sing more often, whatever. Well, he's right. And when I do that kind of thing, I tend to be more productive, happier, more intentional, oddly enough, in a creative space that could be less intentional. It really creates more intentionality for me. And I find that interesting.
Yeah.
He asked me an interesting question the other day. I want to post this out to all of our coach friends to get their impact. But he said, if coaching were a song, what would the key words be? And what would the progression, the melodic progression, look like? Well,
You have a very insightful son.
Yeah, talking about something that would open you up to possibilities and things that might be really interesting to reflect on. So that was just yesterday when he mentioned that, and I've been reflecting on it ever since.
That's so cool, so beautiful. And that sense of opening up, you've said that multiple times, and your face lights up every time you say it. So it's clear it's already becoming a guiding star or a North Star for you as you think about what this next year looks like. And it's beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, if I were to write it down as things that matter, be more creative, be more caring, build more relationships, strengthen the relationships you have, be less judgmental. And I'm by nature not necessarily a judgmental person, but we all have that in our nature, I think.
Yeah.
And so those things become, if you were to sort of list, these are the things that I want to be intentional about, then you can almost fast forward and say, and if I'm able to do these, here are some of the impacts that might be made out there.
I know you well enough, Andy, to know that those are things that you're good at and that have always been important to you. So there's maybe even another level to this that we haven't really talked about, is that process and the pause is really getting clear about what you value. What are your values and what do you care deeply about? Because even the way I hear you talk about that, you care deeply about relationships. You always have. That is a value of yours. That is consistent across the many years that I've known you. So some of those things are really foundational to who you are. And becoming really clear about what our values are and being able to name those values can also be part of this process of intentionality, as re-anchoring to our values.
Yeah.
Opening up is a different thing, I think. Like, there's some of these things you're talking about which are deeply held values that you have, and opening up might be a value, but it also just might be where you are in this phase of life.
Yeah.
And we might create my words are different every year, and my guess is your words are different every year. But the values that you talked about as in relationships, building relationships, being kind, those are pretty consistent just in how I have experienced you again, we've known each other.
Yeah. A long time.
16 years, 17 years.
Yeah.
It's been a long
At least.
time.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. And I've written down now this idea of opening up and what that really means to me. So I'll have to explore that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go back to you in this mix of how do values drive your intentionality?
My values, have always been pretty crystal clear about what my values are. And I think values are different than needs. I think we did a whole podcast on this and really differentiating them. Values, I think, are pretty fundamental to who you are. They come from your upbringing, your religious upbringing, your cultural upbringing, like everything that sort of formed you as a human being becomes sort of these crux of who you are, and they stay pretty consistent over
Mhm.
time. And my values are pretty solidified around integrity, equality, fairness. Those are things that are
Yeah.
really part of who I am, and those things don't change. I think the seasons of our life and where we are in our life or our career, what we're trying to impact, what our purpose is, I think those things shift and change. And those are the words: simplify, find the good, and create. I wouldn't call those values, but I would call those, that's where I'm at this season. That's what's
Right.
really calling me. That's what's going to create the balance in those buckets so that I don't feel drained and I continue to be at my best.
Yeah. They
So I
probably
think,
reflect your values, though.
right, absolutely. I
Yeah.
think that's absolutely true. But your values stay pretty consistent throughout your life. Your needs change. Now, your needs and your values might be the same, but they might be different. But I think your value systems are the anchor. Maybe that's if we're going to go to the sea. I just went to the Titanic exhibit this weekend, which
Oh,
was
yeah.
really well done, by the way. But so ocean liners and the sea are on my mind. But you think about sort of the lighthouse and having this sort of guiding star in the darkness and the murky waters,
Mm.
but then you've got the anchor that you can drop that can keep you stable and really sort of in place. So I think they're both really important.
Yeah. I think so too. I want to project here that we've talked a lot about values here. And yet when people think about this idea of intentionality, they really think about goals.
Right.
Which of these is more important in terms of being intentional leadership, being intentional as we move forward?
I think it's a great question. Again, just to differentiate and be clear, if we're treating our planning at the beginning of the year as just a goal, and we're not grounded to our values or what's bringing us that sense of balance and meaning and purpose in our lives, we can go adrift pretty quickly. I think for me, this is how it works for me. So my values are pretty solidified. I don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about them because they are part of me. I'm rock solid on them. The words for the year sort of come out of where I'm at in my season of life and the kind of impact that I want to have. But that it's sort of a funnel in some
Mm.
ways. Well, it's a funnel, but the values are sort of the foundation of the funnel, maybe. I'm not sure that
Ah,
metaphor stands up, but I think about the values as the foundation. But then there's this sort of funnel, like there's these big words, guiding star, but I also have priorities. So I set 3 priorities in that vein of simplify. I have 3 priorities for the year that I'm going to focus on, and the rest I'm going to let go of. And and those priorities then become can become goals, can lead into goals. And if it becomes important for me at some point in the future, I'm not there yet because, like I said, I had the big long plan last year, but I'm just sort of bristling against that this year. So I'm trying to keep these priorities in order, in less in like you have to do this by this time, and if you don't make it you're not going to be successful. I'm going to look at it, no, like by the end of the year I want this, and I'm going to create and break and iterate and not get hung up. I'm
mm,
going to move faster than I have in the past and feel a lot more fluid in the process than being so planful and analytical about it like I may have been in the past. So I do have priorities, so I know exactly where I'm putting my energy. And that's like another piece of
yeah,
grounding.
yeah. So we've talked about what works for us, Andy and Teresa.
Uh-huh.
If we were to help our audience understand some steps they might take, where would we start?
I would say build some time in for quiet reflection. whatever that looks like to you. Maybe you do it while you're driving to work or you're driving somewhere. Maybe it's on a hike. Maybe it's sitting in a coffee shop. Maybe it's having conversations with your friends or your family. Like find whatever is meaningful for you and build some time in for that so that it's intentional. And that
Yeah.
I do think it's important to give yourself enough time. I think it's different for everyone what enough means, but enough time. I alluded to this earlier. I think it's your nervous system has to settle. If you are anxious or like, I got to get back to my to-do list, like, I got to get this done, get this done. If you're like revved up, it's hard to get into that reflective state. So
Mhm.
you have to give yourself enough time to let all of that stuff sort of settle a little bit so that you can really get some spaciousness. For some people that might be a week, some people that might be a day, some people it might be 2 hours, but I think it is like build in some time enough that lets your nervous system settle that you can like do some of this reflection and
That,
then do the reflection.
yeah, that requires some discipline, doesn't it?
It does.
So what do we
It
do with the
does.
person who is not so disciplined?
Well, that's interesting because I am a disciplined person, so I'm not sure I can answer the question. Like, my easy answer would be, well, just get some discipline and put it on your calendar, but I'm not sure that works for everyone.
Right,
Maybe it's just like bristle against the discipline and just give yourself some spaciousness while you're doing the things that you already love to do. Like, don't make it another task. Just do what you described earlier while you're cooking dinner or while you're,
right.
going for a walk or while you're taking Toby or your dog out for a walk, like, which
Yeah.
is Andy's dog's name is Toby.
He's a lovely
You're
dog. Mhm.
while you're taking them for a walk, whatever it is, like just let your mind wander and drift a little. Maybe that's enough discipline. I don't think people who are not disciplined are not going to suddenly become disciplined. So don't try to
Right.
make yourself eat what you're
I
not.
agree with that. And yet the act of slowing down and reflecting, drifting, letting your mind go where it goes feels important here.
Yeah. Well,
But maybe
another good
also
place.
what feels important is what do I do with that?
Yeah.
What do I do with what am I realizing about myself or about my journey in that space that might help me in the future?
I was just getting ready to say another place where a lot of great ideas come is in the shower, because that warm water and just
Yeah.
like I I have a lot of great ideas in the shower. And, like just
And
wherever
good
those
show
spaces
tunes,
are,
probably, right?
wherever you can just grab a moment to just, like you just said, like let your mind wander, just let that happen. And I know it's harder for some than others, especially if your nervous system is revved up, but you got to be looking for those places and spaces. And maybe it's enough just to say, hey, I'm going to give myself some time. And here's where I'm going to do it, like when I go for a walk or whatever. But I think you have to find something that works for you, but it does feel important to write those things down. And it doesn't have to be a journal. It doesn't have to be a paragraph. It might be a word or a bullet or a bullet point
Mm,
or, whatever works for you. It could be a sticky note on your desk, whatever. But just so that you collect out of the myriad of thoughts that you have, that you collect the ones that feel sort of important. And then if you can like take those words and go, what sort of is representative of all of those? Find something really simple. Again, like, is it just a word? And some people I've seen will take those words and they'll put them on a necklace or they'll put them on a bracelet so that
mm.
it's with them all the time.
Yeah.
Paste it on your desk. Dare I say, tattoo it on your body, which my son has actually done. I have a son that does that. So, words that are important, ideas that are important, there are ways I think to ground them in who you are as a person. And then put it somewhere visible and remind yourself about it.
Mm.
My hesitation is making this too hard. Like, make it
Yeah,
simple,
make
but
it
make it
simple.
something that works for you.
Agree. Okay, so we've given them guidance to create that space, to be able to think, to reflect, to let their mind go where it goes, to record that in some way that's simple. And then what's next?
On that note, this is sort of going back a little bit, but I had a student in a class I was teaching one time do this. It was around a particular idea, but I was asking them to distill their sort of thinking about something into a sentence. So in class, they just did a brain dump of all of the words into ChatGPT, and
Mm-hmm.
ChatGPT created a sentence. So that's another thing that you can do to really use AI to support you
Great
is
use for the technology.
like
Yes.
dump it in, like dump all of your thoughts in and say, like, what's a word that represents all of these brain dump ideas and words that I
Right.
just put in there? And you could even ask it, give me 10 words so that you have a choice. You can go, yeah, does that one? Nope, that's not really it. But this one, yes, that really speaks to me when you feel like, yeah, that's the word. You don't have to overthink this. I think having simplicity. Um, but that word or whatever it is some people make a vision board and they've got it. Some
Ah,
people are, if
yeah.
you're more creative, you want it in pictures. So some people want a picture, some people want a word, some people want a full plan. Like you
A
got to find
song.
the thing or a song. And that's fair. Or anything like a saying, a quote, anything that works for you. But I think writing it down, that action of writing it down is part of what creates the new neural pathway. To create the new sort of
Yeah.
rhythm and the new thing. It's that engaging that front part of your brain to write it down can help sort of solidify and help you create those new neural pathways. So I think, there is something to getting it out of your head and down somehow, some way, in a place where you can look at it. If it's just a sticky note at the top of your computer,
Right.
whatever, but it becomes that you can internalize it to the extent that then you just like you can turn to it when you want to make decisions or you want to choose whether I should do this or shouldn't do this or where should I spend my time or what decisions should I make. It becomes a really practical guidepost in all kinds of things that you do throughout the year.
It's intentional.
It's intentional.
I love that.
Circle back around. Any other advice you have about what you do with it?
Yeah, I think the our tendency is to lose sight of that.
Hmm.
If we go through that process of looking at, of defining that word or that phrase or that picture or that whatever that shows us our way, shows us our path. People have a tendency to lose sight of that. We have to somehow find a trigger that brings us back, that allows us to understand we're off path, we need to get back on path. This doesn't feel right. What did I mean by right? And
Right.
so we have to be careful not to treat this process as just an exercise or an event, but it's an ongoing process that helps us stay grounded, that helps us stay focused, that helps us stay away from the drift and more in
Yeah.
line with what we need to do. And those triggers might be different for different people. Some people have used, like the bands on their hands or rubber band or something, right? That's a technique that people use to say, and when they feel that, they go, oh, and it
Yeah.
brings back what they're trying to do. Some people will do it with a picture or do it with a sound, or there are lots of different triggers that can help remind you. But it is a process and it's something that we almost have to be intentional when we wake up.
Yeah. To your point, I was mentioning Jonathan Fields earlier in this, and he talks about he has a whole system called success scaffolding. And I like that as another metaphor, that scaffolding idea. So you get the intentionality, you set the guidepost, but then there has to be a scaffolding that keeps us grounded to it and then keeps us building it in. So what's the scaffolding that you built? So in just practical terms, like some of the priorities have trickled down into actions that I want to take on a daily basis. I
Yes.
also have a table on my desk that just says, these are the things that you want to do. Most of them are health related. Drink 64 ounces of water a day, get 10,000 steps. And I mark it off every single day. And I've been doing it for probably
Yeah.
5 years. I have 5 year, every month I make a new one. I change the goals around if something isn't working for me or I don't like it or I want to shift or change. But at the end of every single day, I go back to that table and I mark off the things that I did and the ones that I didn't. So I have a record of it. So that's scaffolding that sort of keeps that in place. So I think that's a really good idea. I have also started doing at the end of every day, which is also on my list that I check off, or you write down the best moment of the day. So that's on my list. So I have
What
to
a
check
great
it off.
idea.
But
Yeah.
then I go to my diary, my journal, and I write down what was the best thing that happened to me today. And I've been doing that since the beginning of the year. So those things kind of work together to keep me on pace. And it's by that scaffolding and those daily practices that we start to build in that just reminds us, oh, yeah, like I'm grounded to this word. So I think, you know, you have to, again, you have to find what works for you because, like you said, the triggers are different. But what is the scaffolding that you can put in place that keeps
Mm.
you attached to it, to the
Yeah.
idea of it, so that it remains important and visible in your decision making throughout the year?
For those who don't resonate with the metaphor of scaffolding, what's
Uh-huh.
another way we might say that?
Accountability structures. I don't know if
Yeah.
anybody's going to resonate with accountability structure. That seems kind of punitive. I don't really like that word, but I mean, that could be another way to think about it is how do you
Mm.
create uh,
Reminders.
reminders?
Um,
I don't know what other metaphor I can come up with, but I mean, it's essentially about accountability.
yeah, sure.
And
Well,
um,
and it's a little bit about the way you describe it, it's a little bit about routine too,
yeah, I think that's true. Like you got to
which,
make it a daily practice to create a new neural pathway, create a new habit.
right, which requires discipline.
Yeah.
And then therein lies some of the challenge where people who are not naturally disciplined might just buck against that and say, well, I don't want
Yes.
that controlling my life.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that. Gretchen Rubin wrote a book called The Four Tendencies, and I love that book. It's one of my favorites to think about accountability because she talks about four different types of how people respond to accountability. So if you're interested in how do I stay grounded, how do I hold myself accountable, that could be a really interesting book for people to read because I'm the one that, like, if I create a structure, I'm going to stick to
Mm.
it. The structure is going to work for me. But then you've got a rebel in there that hates and bucks against all structure. And if you put the structure in place, even if it's structure that they want, and even if it's to get something they want, they're going to buck against the structure and they're going to undermine their own progress just because they don't want the structure. So
Yeah,
it sort of
sure.
gives you there's a quiz in there to show you like how do you respond to self accountability or accountability generally. What can you do to help yourself? Because I've got one of my kids is a rebel, and so I was describing to him everything that she was talking about, and he was like, I don't do that, I don't do that. And I was like,
Mhm.
yes you do. And he's like, yes I do. So he'll just buck against structure even if the structure is something that he wants to do.
Right, right. Well, so here are a lot of things to think about.
Yeah.
As we wrap this session up, what are one or two key things you want our listeners to remember?
I think for folks that take the pressure off and don't do what everyone else is doing, do a process that works for you. And the process is really important. That pause and the thinking and giving yourself space is as important as what you end up writing down on the paper, because that's what you're going to learn about yourself is in that process. So I would say, I think it's most important just to remember, find what works for you. Don't do something that works for somebody else, especially if it's going to cause you stress or frustration. Just because it works for somebody, like Warren Buffett, for instance, who's really successful, if it doesn't work for you, it's not going to work for you.
Yeah.
So I think take the pressure off, give yourself space, and find what works for you. And if what you're doing doesn't work, try something else.
Good.
How about you?
Some of my takeaways: spend the time to figure out what really matters to you. Create that North Star, that thing to guide, so that when your head is up and you're looking toward it, it takes you down a path. Give yourself a lot of grace. This is for you, not for the masses necessarily. You don't have to dress it up and have it be something for someone else. It needs to be meaningful for you. And so spend that time considering, what do I really care about? What does that really look like? And practically, what does that look like in my day-to-day work? How do I know I'm on path versus I'm drifting? And so I think that important tool and truth is critical here for leading intentionally, to leading ourselves intentionally, and also leading other people intentionally, that we need to be laser focused on the things that really matter. And the only way to do that is understand what we really care about, what really matters to us, to define that North Star.
And like you alluded to earlier, we just get this one beautiful life, and that's it.
Yeah.
And what are we going to do with the time that we have? And that's the question. What are we going to do with the time that we have? And this pause allows us to make sure that we're able to do that.
Great. Thanks for your time today, Teresa. Thank you,
Andy,
listeners.
this was really fun.
Yeah. Thank you, listeners, for always tuning in and listening to our chat back and forth. And hopefully some of the ideas are helpful and help move you forward. Thank you for joining us on Growth Beyond Boundaries. We hope today's episode gave you the inspiration and tools to push past limits and achieve meaningful growth. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. Your support helps us reach more people on their growth journeys. Remember, growth starts with one step, one conversation, and one decision to go beyond boundaries. Until next time, keep challenging the limits and discovering your potential. See you soon.